Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room is always open at crusadechannel.com/chat, and that's the only social media out there worth actually socializing in. We would ask you, please, that wherever you find Joe and I on social media, particularly all you good people out there, the Frontline TV, we'd ask you to do one of two things. If you could, go on YouTube, go to the Frontline TV and like, subscribe, share, whatever you can do, or thefrontlinetv.com. And there, if you'd like, okay, you could contribute to Joe and I and our success. We're asking for $5 a month, nothing more than that. Our goal is to get, Joe, what do we want to do? We want to get up to a gazillion subscribers at $5 a month, and then we'll change the world. What do you think?
Sounds good to me. Then we make 5 times a gazillion. That works.
Exactly. So, and the good thing about, Joe and I is like, we don't get paid for doing this stuff. So, if we ever, that's something, great like that happen by the grace of God, then that's what we would do, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring souls to God, and in our own way. St. Paul said, not everybody could be everything. You have preachers, you have teachers, you have all different kinds of people in the Catholic Church that have one goal in mind: to bring people into the church for the salvation of their soul. Joe and I are big mouths. That's the talent that God gave us.
You have preachers, you have teachers, and you have cannoli eaters.
That's right. We're cannoli eating evangelists from New Jersey. So we'd ask you, thefrontline.com or the Frontline TV on YouTube. Either way, you could contribute if you like. We really ask you to go, if you're interested in contributing, we'd really ask you to go to thefrontline.com, frontlinetv.com, more so than Patreon. But yeah, we appreciate all your help and prayers. Of course, King Dude hasn't been around for a couple weeks, so we're happy to be back on the Crusade Channel, I guess, between Christmas and New Year's, and everybody's busy. So, hola to all you Crusaders out there. Joe and I are happy to be back. So we have an interesting conversation tonight. I'm going to say this, though. Now, we want to talk a little bit about, I'll give you a couple of examples, a couple of individual stories, but the general topic is justice. That's all we hear. That's all we hear, Joe, ad nauseum. It's justice, but it's usually social justice. It's got nothing to do with true justice, okay? And I use the word true deliberately, because you can't have, justice without truth. And obviously we know that, and we're going to talk about that and a couple of examples. But I wanted to mention, over the weekend, Joe Resinello, and to all you Crusaders out there, crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing, I saw something interesting, and I just wanted to bring it up. Fox News had on Father James Martin, okay, and Rachel Campos Duffy, and from every outward sign, Joe, her and her husband, Sean, who was a member of Congress, okay, are faithful Catholics. They have like 9 kids. They're living the faith. Very, very good people, okay, love them. And she kind of, in a very nice way, but she gave Father Martin a couple questions I don't think he was prepared for, because they were talking about the fall off in religious belief in general in America, not just the Catholic faith, okay? But one thing I don't think he liked that she did, she brought up the influence of Marxism, cultural Marxism in America. And I think she also, by implication, meant within the church. And he completely deflected. She asked 3 pointed questions that a guy like James Martin doesn't want to get, and he deflected every one. Well, I don't think it's that, and then moved to something else. He will never, ever address anything truthfully. And you know what, Joe? I would respect his call for justice towards people, the way he sees it, if he actually told the truth. But see, he's an example of the idea that you cannot detach truth from justice. And I think that he doesn't, I'm not going to call him a liar, but Joe, he doesn't recognize the truth of the Catholic faith as written, as you always say, as taught by the Catholic Church, as taught by the magisterium, as taught by Scripture, as taught by tradition, okay? He doesn't adhere to the truth. That's why I don't believe him. But I thought it was an interesting, it's only a 5-minute interview. And anybody out there, I would suggest, not now, don't leave the Crusade Channel. But go check it out. I think Rachel Campos Duffy did a pretty good job. Having said that, Joe, let's talk about truth and justice.
Let's do it, brother. Regis Martin in Crisis Magazine wrote an article, A Crisis of Truth. The article begins with something from Fulton Sheen. Fulton Sheen, I'm a big fan of. We had a great interview with Alan Smith in Canada. It's on our Veritas Catholic Network page, the podcasts. You should check it out. But this is what Sheen had to say. He said, "It's easy to find truth, though it is hard to face it, and it's harder still to follow it." Now, let's just talk about that before we get into Martin. As far as the article goes, I mean, when he says, Fulton Sheen, who's on his way to become a saint, it's easy to find truth. Why is it easy? Because it's written on your heart. It's written on your heart. Why is it hard to face? Because you have to change. You have to be honest with you, you have to bend to the truth, and that requires your life changing. People aren't willing to do that. And basically to follow it, because Jesus Christ is the truth, the way, the truth, and the life is to follow Christ because he is the truth. And that also means going against the current. I mean, we recently interviewed Kevin Wales, and he talked about like salmon. When you're following the truth, you're going against the tide. You're swimming upstream. That's just the way it is. It's been that way since Christ walked the earth, and it's going to be that way till he returns. And again, people are not willing to do that. Now, sometimes people are sincere, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as it goes with regard to primacy of conscience, but they're sincerely wrong when it comes to truth. Why is that? I mean, there's a number of reasons, and we could talk about that, but arguably, we all have to be searching for the truth. You see, when you find the truth, there's a peace. You find peace. If there's a rub inside of you, you have to be actively searching for the truth. And this is what the Catechism says. You are saved. This is the Catechism, not Joe Resinello, so please don't bite my head off. This is what the Catechism says. You are saved through baptism and the Catholic Church. That is what the Catechism says. 1992 Catechism. You are saved by baptism and the Catholic Church. And if you are not Catholic, through no fault of your own, the church holds out hope for you. That is in the Catechism. Now, the second phrase, and John Ross, who's our producer, to be honest with you, illustrated this, I thought, rather well, probably about 18 months ago. This is not the 13th century where 90% of Europe couldn't read. We have Google. We have books easily accessible. Are you actively searching for the truth if you have not found it? In your life, it's your priority to find the truth, not to get rich, not to be comfortable, to find and pursue and live and follow the truth. And I will say this, Joe Pasil, if you are, you'll find it. And if you do, you'll find yourself in the Catholic Church.
Do you remember when we interviewed E. Michael Jones, and we talked about his book Logos Rising, the history of ultimate reality? What is the ultimate reality at its root? It's Jesus Christ. And who is Jesus Christ? He's this Greek term that became incarnate. In other words, the Greek God shed his grace and his light on the Greeks as he does on all people. Okay. The Greeks had it right after a little trial and error. The Logos, reason, rationality, word, truth. Christ is the truth incarnate. Okay. What has history been if not a history between Logos and anti-Logos? And the thing is this, why do you need Logos? Because again, going back to the original point, Joe, what you have right now is let's backtrack. I'm sorry to do this to all you good people out there at Crusade Channel, but I have a million thoughts going through my head because this is a conversation that sometimes it brings a million thoughts into your head. Start with justice. What is justice? Being due, getting what you deserve. Getting what you truly deserve. That's justice, okay? But you can only receive justice in truth. If I'm a man who's pretending to be a woman, okay, it is not justice, social justice, or any other kind of justice, okay, to force anyone else to give me the title of woman. Now, I bring that up for a reason because that's what Regis Martin is talking about. He says, we don't have a problem with justice in the world. And that's why I brought up Logos. We have a problem with truth. if Logos is the truth and Jesus Christ is the Logos, there's your dilemma, Joe Resinello. You can't have justice unless you recognize the truth itself. So what are you in a position of now? Okay. As Martin says, basically he says, despite the noisemakers telling us otherwise, it is not need for justice that is the burning issue of the day. Transgenderism is not the issue of the hour for normal people. You know what is the issue, Joe? That the transgender ideology and the gender ideology is being rammed down our children's throats. That's what the issue is. And what does that have more to do with, justice or truth? It's
Well,
an
I like how he
emptying
put
of
it this
the
way.
emptying of the truth.
He says, truth simply understood is conformity to what is real, not woke imposition of the unreal.
Exactly.
You don't have the luxury of defining what is real. Reality is reality, regardless of who interprets it.
Right.
Sadly, that's not what's going on. And
But
frankly,
is it deliberate, Joe?
it could be. I think there are sincere Joe, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, I don't know the hearts of people, but there are many people, particularly young people. I always give young people the benefit of the doubt because it takes time to figure life out. It really does. Not everyone has the benefits of a good family. Like it takes time. And there are many young people who are very, very sincere in their beliefs. They just are sincerely wrong. Mother Angelica, I think, put it so well. She said, you could be on a plane and sincerely think you're going to Honolulu, but you're going to Cleveland. And when you land,
that's a big difference, Joe.
right? And then when they say we're now entering Cleveland, you can't change that reality.
Joe,
You're going to Cleveland.
I understand what you're saying. You're much more charitable than I am. Okay. You really are. I'm not just saying that, but here's what comes to mind when you say that. America during the time of the Soviet Union, particularly at its height under Stalin, okay, the most powerful country in the world, no question about it. Stalin, perhaps in his time, the most powerful person in all of human history. Okay, he had that much power. Okay, he had in America what you would call useful idiots. And here's my beef. Okay, is that yes, the useful idiots were sincere, Joe, and I agree with you. And they were sincerely wrong. People like Leonard Bernstein was a useful idiot. The Hollywood types, the Hollywood 10, the communists out there. Not all useful idiots, not all, let's say, sincerely wrong. Some of them were as evil as Stalin, okay, and would have supported and never said a word about his genocides and what he did. Now, my point is this. My beef, Joe, is that nowadays everybody wants to claim to be the useful idiot. Well, I'm a sincere believer, but there's a lot of Stalins now, is my point. And those people are our real enemy because they look at all those people, okay, as useful idiots. When you get some jerky school board member who thinks that they're being totally just and loving and caring when they ram this ideology down your children's throats, okay, that person is a useful idiot. But there's a lot of people pulling her strings that are absolutely evil in my mind. Because
No question.
those who would perpetrate this, Joe, see, when you do this, if you want to do this to your own kid, you have to stand before God. When you do this to somebody else's child, now you've crossed the line. Now you are evil. You can't do this to someone else's child. And you know it's a lie, and you still perpetrate it. That's my beef, Joe.
Well, there's definitely people. What I would say is then there are folks who have an agenda because it's about power. I mean, like that's where the truth gets distorted. That goes on in the church. That goes on outside the church. That goes on in the politic of the country. It's about power. The truth gets distorted. And frankly, that's also about ideology. And then that they're not sincere. I mean, that's a nefarious angle. Clearly, if you're manipulating something for your own benefit and your own power, and God will judge those people accordingly. And there are definitely people like that. I mean, I've worked with people like that to enrich themselves. People manipulate the truth. They twist the truth for self, betterment, financially speaking. But ultimately, that is what the church, you see, sadly, a lot of people who are outside the church or even within the church don't know what the church teaches, or they look at the bad examples of the church. You see, I always say this: the Catholic Church is perfect on paper. The people in it aren't. And that includes me. I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner. We're all sinners in varying degrees, you
Right.
know, but it's perfect. And that's why all we have to do, that's the beauty of the church, is just follow it. It's written down. It's when man starts to manipulate what's on paper. And frankly, we do that because, again, it comes down to our knees. We don't want to bend. We don't want to change. That's
Mhm.
people in the church. That's even in the hierarchy of the church. They
Well,
want, they want to change it to suit their lifestyle, their life's choices, and they still want to be in the graces of God. It
well,
doesn't work
Joe,
that way.
listen, amen, brother. Everything you just said is right, but I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, and this is something that maybe hopefully wakes people up a little bit. It might be a stupid example in people's minds, out there at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. But I'll give you a sign of hope. Now, I agree with you about the hierarchy, okay? Blaise Supich, Cardinal Supich, went to the Chicago March for Life. He got booed. And you want to know what? I hope it's a little bit of a wake up call for him that they're not just a bunch of right wing trad Catholics that are booing him, because he's just an example of one, I think, who wants to cozy up to the world. We brought him up before at the front line with Joe and Joe. His all of a sudden he makes a phone call to Dick Durbin the day after Paprocki issues a letter, or the week after Paprocki issues a letter saying, Dick Durbin, don't show up to the communion rail in my diocese. You will not receive Holy Communion. And so Supich, I bring him up because to me, he's one of those people that knows the truth and yet wants to seemingly deny the truth. Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later on in the show. But I want to get back to something you just said about the church, because I think it's important for people to realize, Joe. It's important for a lot of non-Catholics to realize, because they rightfully look at these men, all right, in the church, in the clergy, or in the hierarchy, and they look at many of us lay people. So I'm going to say men and women who self-identify as Catholics, who are not living up to the demands. I'm not talking about sinners. We're all sinners. I'm talking about people who scoff, self-identified Catholics that scoff at the teaching on IVF, or they scoff at the teaching on gay marriage, or they even scoff at the teaching on abortion. And this is why I brought up E. Michael Jones, because Jones says, and I'm going to also follow this up. Jones says that the Catholic Church is the vehicle. That's a powerful statement, Joe. Is the vehicle of Logos in human history. And he's right. It's not the men in the Catholic Church that are the vehicle of Logos in human history. It's the church that's the vehicle of Logos in human history. Now, Regis Martin, he goes back to Belloc, and Belloc said something similar. Hilaire Belloc, Catholic writer in the early, him and Chesterton were two prominent Catholics of the early 20th century. Most of you out there at the Crusade Channel know who he is. Belloc said, and Joe, I love your comments on this, both on Jones's comment, and Belloc said, the Catholic Church now this gets back to truth, Joe. The Catholic Church is the exponent of reality. That's a powerful statement. Said it is true. Its doctrines in matters large and small are statements of what is. You know what? When Catholics hold to that, Joe, we are the most powerful force in the world, because we are the engine of Logos, and we cling to that Logos, because that Logos is Christ. What say you, Joe?
No, I would agree. But sadly, a lot of Catholics don't know what the church teaches. And sadly, a lot of them, frankly, they don't have the guts to either live it or speak it in the public square, because they'll be scoffed at and they're not invited to the barbecue, sadly. But when Catholics live it, they'll see the fruit of those decisions. And history has proven that correct. History has proven that correct. What I also want to explore, though, in this conversation is what is bad fruit from Vatican II, the spirit of Vatican II, the quote unquote spirit of Vatican II, when it comes to the terms primacy of conscience. That came out of the spirit of Vatican II. And I've heard this even taught in RCIA, which is the initiation when people want to become Catholic, whereby Your conscience usurps the teaching of the church if it
Mm,
doesn't sit with you. You see, that is not a Catholic teaching
no.
because, again, you can be sincere, but you could be sincerely wrong. And I'll use an example. I've used it on the show. In my 20s, I went to a confession. I was living in Hoboken at the time, and I was at St. Anne's, which is an Italian parish in Hoboken. And the priest was trying to get me to come to basically my grasp of a sin in a nice way. And I was arguing with them in the confessional. I was sincere, but I was wrong. And at the time, I didn't see it. Looking back as an older man, I see I was wrong in this
Mm,
particular case. So there are people who are sincere. However, the proper teaching of the church is this: the church is there, and this goes along with what Bullock and Michael Jones said. It is to form your conscience. You see, if you're in conflict with the church and you're a good Catholic, say you're sincerely trying to live the faith, and you find yourself in conflict with the church, a teaching, a rock solid teaching of the church. I'll just use an example. I'm just picking one. You're divorced and you're remarried.
okay. That's a
Just
popular one.
picking, I'm just
All right.
picking one. And you feel that there's nothing wrong with that. If you're sincere, what you should do is continue to go to church, continue to go to mass. You shouldn't receive. And you should pray.
Right.
Go to mass. Don't receive. And pray. And God will enlighten you because you're being sincere. You see, anyone's invited in the door to the
Right.
Catholic Church. You have to be in
Right.
full communion with all the teachings to receive.
That's one of the things that bothers me is like I used to go to confession at which one was it? St. Francis of Assisi Parish on 31st Street
I
in
know it.
Manhattan.
By Penn
Right. And
State.
they have all are welcome. That's always a catchphrase amongst the pro LGBT crowd,
But
right?
that's
All
true,
are
though.
welcome. You're all welcome. See, this is what bothers me about the Father James Martins of the world and the people who talk about primacy of conscience. Okay. What do you mean? If in good conscience, okay, my mother's 83 years old, okay, and she's got Alzheimer's, and I put a pillow over her head to suffocate her. In my conscience, am I exonerated from committing the mortal sin of murdering my mother? I mean, I'm being extreme, but sometimes you have to ask yourself these questions. At what point does primacy of conscience end?
Well, Joe,
Martin
you
Sheen,
ever
the actor,
notice?
said it too.
You
Go
ever
ahead, Joe.
notice on like MSNBC when they do those shows Lock Up, when they interview prisoners like all over the world? I used to watch those shows when they're on. It's always, I find them interesting. Everyone's innocent in jail.
Oh,
Oh, I'm working on my case. I'm working on my case. Everyone is innocent.
Joe, you remember? It's a great example because now you're reminding me of a great movie, right? Shawshank Redemption. Okay, so in Shawshank Redemption, remember when he said one of the characters replies, he goes, "Hey, man, we're all innocent in here. Lawyer screwed me.
That's
My
right.
lawyer screwed me. Listen. It's who I forgot who said it. The greatest indoor sport there is self-pity and blaming everybody else for your problems. Okay. And you want to know what? The biggest problem in the world right now, all right, because it's the Logos, the vehicle of Logos in the world, okay, is the Catholic Church. It's easy to pick on the Father James Martins of the world or the idiots out there who talk about primacy of conscience. It's easy. That's not their target. The target that they're trying to defeat just won't go away. And why? Because Christ said that the powers of hell will not prevail against the church. Okay. And for all the reasons we just said. But because we're here at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online, is to make sure that people are aware of this. We might think, Joe, let me give you an example. And I love your comments. We might think that everybody who's hearing our voice, whether here or on social media or on Veritas Catholic Network, you might think that people know or just understand that what we're saying is just straight up Catholic truth. Joe, there's a lot of people that don't know. That's why if I had to offer a solution in all of this is first rule of thumb, say it. Don't assume somebody knows it. You could be a confession going, Eucharist receiving Catholic. Don't assume that they know a lot of what we're talking about. Not no fault of their own. Sometimes, Joe, listen, man, What I always think, Joe, and you tell me what you think, and I'm going to shut up. The Lord gave us the church because he knows that he also gave us responsibilities to get married, to have a family, and everything else. That if you stick to the fundamentals of the church, you'll never go wrong. We talk about it all the time. Go to mass, keep holy the Sabbath day, worship God, go to confession, receive Jesus in the Eucharist, and pray. Pray, as St. Paul said, pray like your life depended on it. A Catholic could do that, Joe, for the rest of their lives and go straight to heaven when they die. Okay. But a lot of them don't know what the hell is going on out there. They look at Father James Martin, they think, wow, he's such an enlightened priest. It's for guys like us and Mike Church and Barrett and the rest of them, Kennedy Hall and everybody else at the Crusade Channel, Brother Andre Marie. Everybody's just got to open their mouth. Keep opening your mouth. And listen, you'll make a dent. It'll make a difference.
Well, ultimately, here's another thing, though. It's your responsibility to pursue the truth if you haven't arrived at it. And again, you arrive at it when you find peace. It's funny that show, The Journey Home with Marcus Grodi. He brings in all types of people who find the Catholic Church. Many of them, and we talked about this recently. I can't remember the gentleman's name. He was a Southern gentleman from Tennessee. The book, Four More Witnesses. Ignatius Press put out the book. I can't believe I'm sorry. I forgot the name, the author. But basically, if you look to the original church fathers, it always points to the Catholic Church.
Oh, yeah.
But again, sadly, people have stumbling blocks, whether they're divorced and remarried, they didn't get an annulment, whatever. There's a million reasons why people don't want to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. But ultimately, it's your responsibility. You see, you can't just write that off to ignorance. We're in a time, in this particular time in history, of information. It's accessible. You know how to read. I mean, when I was a kid and we had to do a book report, you had to go to the friggin' library and they had the Dewey Decimal System library, and you're looking at microfiche and you're finding books. It was a process.
Joe, whenever you say microfiche on this show, I have to cringe because I remember. Go ahead, I cut you off.
No, but I'm just saying, like now that's just not the case. Like, you can find the truth. You could read about it. I mean, Edith Stein, she came from an Orthodox Jewish family. She read a book. She was a philosopher. She was brilliant. Right. She read a book on Saint Teresa of Avila. And boom, she just said, this is the truth. And she changed her whole life. The problem is, I think people come to points where they realize this is true, and then they just deflect and make a right turn. And they're like, I'm not going there for whatever reason. You see, if that's you, you're in trouble. I'm telling you this right now. If God has shown you something in your life, and this is all people's lives, and this is another thing which I believe to be true. When we die and we face the Lord, and say we get the no answer, you're not coming in, and you say to him, I didn't know, what he's going to do is say, what do you mean? And he's going to show you. And this is life. People, there's situations. People always say, like, I don't know where God is. I don't know the truth. What truth? Life is right in front of you. And here's the thing: when you're not on the right road, your life isn't working properly.
Joe, let me ask you a question. Okay, was Pilate culpable even though he was standing right in the presence of the truth?
Of course he was. He knew he was innocent.
Jesus, and he said, "What is truth?" I mean, I always think whenever we talk about truth, like we're talking about, here at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, Joe. Whenever truth comes up in any of our conversations, okay. The immediate thing I think about is Pilate, because Pilate, even though he did not want to crucify Christ, he still was he was staring at the truth, right in the truth's face, okay, and asked, "What is truth?" Okay, and then walked away from it. Well, and I think that's what a lot of. I'm sorry, Joe. Real quick, I think that's what a lot of people do.
Well, I think Pilate
for a number of reasons.
I think what Pilate was saying there, this is my thoughts on it, is he knew he was innocent, but he said, what's truth? Almost like, I'm a man of power, and in power, the truth does not apply. Like, what's truth to my position? I have to run this country. this
Right.
territory, and truth has nothing to do with it. You see, that's where I'm saying that's a decision point, because we're not here to bring heaven on earth. We're here to follow God at all costs, whether it's convenient or inconvenient. And many
Right.
times it is inconvenient. And that's what Pilate was not willing to do.
But here's now juxtapose that with something, Joe, if you don't mind, because a lot of people might listen to us and say, well, anybody in that position would have cowered. Anybody would have, let's say, backed down. No, no. Pilate was in a position of power. Okay, so what? He gives up his life. Was his life more valuable than, let's say, Saint Stephen? Was his life more valuable than Perpetua and Felicity? Was his life more valuable than Saint Paul or any of the apostles or Saint Peter? His life wasn't more valuable than theirs. Why do they resonate throughout history and Pilate does not? If it wasn't for the Catholic Church, nobody would even know who Pontius Pilate was. Okay. I learned about Pontius Pilate when I first learned the creed. So did you. I didn't know who Pontius Pilate was. I only found out about him later when I read something about Roman history. But my larger point is this, Joe, is that it's always like, well, you can't blame people who have a lot of money or have a lot of power. They can't just give it up. Well, yeah, they can. What are you talking about? It's okay for Perpetua and Felicity to get their throats cut in the arena, or Saint Stephen to get his head crushed with a rock. But Pilate gets a pass because he was a governor. I never liked that argument. But the reason why I bring it up, Joe, is this is why the saints, that's why they resonate with us. That's why they're living. Well, they're obviously alive in heaven, but they're living examples for us about how we could detach ourselves. And quite frankly, the modern world does not want to detach itself from anything. And that's why, to get back to our original point at the front line with Joe and Joe today, is that these are people who want to say that they say, I seek for justice. I want what's right for people. I want people to just be happy. But Joe, it's devoid of truth. And ultimately, by the way, and I'd love your comments on this, if it's devoid of truth, then it necessarily is devoid of love, because
Well,
you
it's
can't
also
have
devoid
you
of
can't.
Christ. You're
Well,
devoid of
that's what I'm
truth. It's
saying.
devoid of Christ. Call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. But think about this again. We're going to talk primacy of conscience, and then we'll go into this next story because I think it's a good one, where you have a former Catholic chaplain to the House of Representatives who basically says that a Catholic can support abortion. Now, that is a bastardization of truth coming from a Catholic priest. And we're
Right.
going to talk about that. But think of this for a moment about primacy of conscience. And I think about this sometimes. First Pope Peter, there's a dispute in the church.
Joe, by the way, there's somebody in the chat room who's going to object to you that you're actually saying the primacy of Peter, because he's saying man made the church, not God. But go
All
ahead.
right. All right. That's fine.
I
What's it
wanted to
called?
make you chuckle, Joe.
So
Joe, there's a Protestant in the chat room.
oh, that's okay. We love you too. But St. Peter is the first pope. Okay. Jesus is died. Now there is a dispute in the church. The first dispute. Can non-circumcised people become Catholic? Follow the way of Christ.
Right.
Now remember, they were all Jews. All of them. Orthodox practicing Jews, including Jesus, was raised in the Jewish tradition. Now, Paul says, yes, they can. Everyone else says no. So then what does the Pope do? He goes off, he thinks about it, and he comes to a decision. And it probably wasn't popular, but it's proved to be right.
Right.
And that's where the primacy of conscience does not usurp the teaching of the church,
Right.
because the Pope, who is Peter, said something.
That's right.
I am sure that a lot of people at that time who were Jewish said, no, I'm not letting Cornelius in because he's a Gentile. And this is not the way it's supposed to be. Here's the deal. You don't have the authority to make that decision. Peter does.
Peter does.
Second, humane vitae. Everyone thought Paul VI was going to go one way. He didn't. He went the other way. And even a large majority of the bishops in the world rejected it. That's primacy of conscience.
Right.
We all know who was right. It was Peter. You see, this is where we have to be obedient. And this is examples of this in the church. You do not have authority. I do not have authority. Why does the church have authority? Because Christ instituted it on the earth, and he's the only man who was resurrected from the dead. That's what makes him different than Buddha, than Moses, than Muhammad, than any other religious figure. He rose from the dead, and he gave the church, the one church that he established, authority. And our conscience, whether we're Catholic or not, does not usurp it.
That's right.
And that you see this now going on.
Right.
And I'm telling you this right now, the devil is smarter than the smartest person. And this is something to be careful with, because I'm telling you right now, ego sneaks in, hubris sneaks in, and I'm not saying like listen, I'm not judging, but what I am saying is those are two examples that were real, where people thought they knew better, and you know something, history proved them to be wrong.
No, you're exactly right. And remember, Joe, put the finer point on the retelling of the historical story of the Council of Jerusalem. Okay, what happened afterwards is very interesting too. Just one sentence, and it was received with joy. You see, when you have clarity, Joe, there's joy in that. When Paul went back, okay, to bring the decision basically of the Pope and really the early church at the time, okay, the message was received with joy. Why? Because Peter went one way or the other? No, because there was clarity. And clarity is something that brings joy, because you say, I know I can't be wrong because this teaching of the church was very clear. That's why the problem that we're living today is the confusion. Is that
That is a
I
problem.
I find the hard time being a joyful Catholic, because from those or from those from whom we're supposed to receive clear teaching, clear guidance, okay, we don't have it. We don't have it.
That is true, and
And
that
I
is a
will
problem.
and I know you want to talk about a couple other things that are going on in the next, 15 or 20 minutes that we have or so, but I want to say this. I'm just going to give a quick Regis Martin conclusion when I mentioned Belloc, okay, and what Belloc said. And here is what, excuse me, Regis Martin had to say in conclusion to his article in Crisis Magazine. It is this quality, it seems to me, which please God, not a few of us continue to find endearing and persuasive, that needs rediscovery amid the confusions and distortions of today. Otherwise, the darkness will close in upon us completely, and we won't even know or remember that there was once something called light. Now, the only thing I would have with that is that, and Regis knows this anyway, Dr. Martin knows this anyway, the light can never be extinguished. John tells us that in the first chapter of his gospel. The darkness can never overcome the light. However, in our minds, Joe, the darkness can overcome the light. That's the issue.
Well,
We
we
have to do it.
rationalize things, Joe. I mean,
Well, I
human
know,
beings
but the thing is
rationalize
that
behavior.
and most people do. Joe, you have, I have, we all have rationalized our behavior, but the church cannot do that, because the church is charged with a different duty, and the men in the church need to start stepping up and recognizing that duty. And I think we need. Let me just say this: Regis Martin talks about confusion. We need a church that's going to start to unravel the confusion that we've been living in, I think, now for quite some time. I think you would agree with me.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, as long as there's one baptized person on the earth who holds to the teachings of the church, there lies the church. The church is alive and well. And Christ, I mean, it's in the storm. The boat is in the storm. It's always been in the storm. There's always been conflicts in the church. But to be truthful with you, um, Christ will right the ship. I'll be honest. I I could only do what I can do. I have no control over that. I know what the church teaches, and I have to be faithful. And that's my role, and that's
Right.
everyone's role, including from the Pope down the line to the old lady who cleans the office, who goes to church on Sunday. It's everybody has their responsibility. But I want to talk about this priest who clearly is using, if you ask me, some form of a primacy of conscience like model in his thought. His name is Patrick Conroy. He's a Jesuit, and he was the former House chaplain in the U.S. And he says, basically, I want to first, before I read the quote, which he stated, I want to get his words correct. I want to tell you what St. Thomas Aquinas, who is probably, the preeminent teacher in the Catholic Church when it comes to be honest with you, theology, what he wrote. He said, the Catholic Church is the supreme authority on issues of faith and morals. And while culpability is certainly lessened if someone sins without realizing they are sinning, there is still a moral, this is the important part, there is still a moral obligation to seek to form one's conscience in accordance with authoritative church teaching. You see, again, you could sincerely be wrong. It could be brought up to you. It may not resonate well inside of you. And then it's up to you to strive to search for it. And I think those will be the questions that God asks those who don't arrive at the truth at the moment of death, that don't accept it. Did you make it your priority? And when it was put in front of you, did you reject it?
Right.
Did you push it aside because it was inconvenient, because it cost? And that's where people are off, because in the mind of America, everyone goes to heaven based on this idea of I'm a good guy.
Right.
Let me tell you this, and I will be clear. Your definition of good and my definition of good doesn't count. It's God's definition that counts. And our primacy has to be that of submission to his. And that's not what we see.
No.
Even within the church.
No, that's why you're bringing
Eh,
up this article, Joe. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry.
but then this gentleman, this, I mean, clearly, I don't know his angle. I mean, I'm not going to speak for him, but this is what he said.
Well, Joe,
He
let's
said,
call it the way it is. It's a typical liberal Catholic. This is a
well,
liberal Catholic
clearly,
Jesuit
clearly,
is what it is, and trying to excuse what is the gravest injustice in all of humanity. The same priest, Joe, would condemn slavery, rightfully so. And the same priest says it's within your conscience whether or not you kill a baby in the womb. That's why his conscience is warped and he's off. Go, Joe.
he says basically this gentleman, he says it's an American value that each one of us can choose where our life is going, stated Conroy on this topic of abortion. That happens to be a Catholic value too, that we should all use our gifts and our talents and our intelligence as best we can to make the best choices we have with regard to the freedom that we've been given. A good Catholic in our system can be saying, given women in our system who have a constitutional right to abort their child, our task as Catholics and fellow Christians is to make it possible for her to optimize her ability to make the choices.
Now,
You see,
tell me at
that's
what point
crazy.
when you're reading that, Joe, when your stomach got a little nauseous and you wanted to puke all over your microphone. Now, I mean, seriously, this is the stuff that I haven't gotten angry at the front line with Joe and Joe in a while. I think, Joe, that's true. I think you even ask all
No,
the
I hear
crusaders,
you. I hear
all right,
you.
and everybody out there on social media, they know I haven't gotten angry in a while. This is the crap that really makes my brains explode. And people say, Joe P., why are you so angry? Because this guy is an effing liar. And I don't care if he wears the Roman collar. If I saw him right in his face, I would say, you know that you're full of crap. You know you're just running shade for your Democrat buddies. That's what you're doing. And all your friends that want to vote Democrat and say they're Catholic. There is no choice here, Father Conroy. There's no choice here. You know what the choice is as taught by the Catholic Church. So why are you lying to people? See, now, to me, Joe, I have no qualms whatsoever calling this guy a liar.
know
He's
what
not
it is?
misguided. He's not
He
sincerely
sounds like a
misguided.
lawyer.
He's a liar. He's
Like,
a lying priest, liberal priest is what he is, who wants to run shade for people who want to support abortion. That's
because know
what
what
he's
it
doing. And I'm sorry,
is like,
Joe, but that's the way I see it.
because know what it is to me? It's like it's double speak. Like people are afraid, and this is some of the bad fruit of Vatican II, is they're afraid, like this idea of accompaniment by watering down teaching, thinking that people, if you basically give them a glass half empty, they'll somehow arrive at the glass full in time. That's not necessarily true. And it's proven to not bear fruit. Now, again, he sounds like a lawyer to me.
Mm,
Like when you're saying optimize your ability to make a choice, there is no choice. You see, we have to be clear, but here's another thing. We have to say things in charity and in love, and we don't basically, with regard to speaking the truth, it's not about crushing people. It's about informing them and guiding them and planting a seed with the hope that they will arrive at it on their own. Because ultimately, it's like anything. You could tell somebody something that doesn't mean they're going to agree with you, and it doesn't mean they're going to digest it, but it is your job to say it. You see, a Catholic, I always use John Harden, who's one day going to become a saint. He says a Catholic is supposed to know the truth, speak the truth, live the truth, and suffer for the truth. You
right.
see, we're not willing to do that, and that includes the clergy. You see, because we talked about this with Kevin Wells, to speak the truth means to live a life that isn't comfortable. You will be the odd man out.
Right.
You are not going to get invited to the barbecue. Your parish may not be the posh parish. You may not get the collections that you think you may get. You may get more because God's more generous than other people. And you may be surprised in that. And that's another story and another show for another day. But
Right.
people are not willing to do it because, again, it's almost like, and again, I have nothing against him. I don't want to, but I think he made a mistake. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes, and I don't mean to pick on him. When Barron was talking to Ben Shapiro and he said, Christ is the primary vehicle into going into
No,
heaven.
he said privileged.
That's wrong. I don't care that you speak languages, Bishop Barron. You're a million times smarter than me. I'm not debating that. But what I am saying is Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Now, can someone get into the church through no fault of their own? The Catechism says that. But in this day and age, right now, what I would say to Ben Shapiro, anyone else who isn't Catholic, are you actively searching for the truth when those moments in your life come up where you feel in conflict with yourself or your positions?
Ben Shapiro is an interesting example because some people would say, but he's a good guy. He's conservative. He's American. He's pro-life. He's against gay marriage. It doesn't
He doesn't
matter.
believe in Christ.
He does
And
not
I'm
believe
not
it.
like
And
this is
he's
where
no, real quick, Joe. He does not have invincible ignorance because he is a man who seeks truth. He seeks philosophical truth. He seeks political truth. But as far as it goes, he's in his mind, he has already found the religious truth, which is Old Testament. Well, I don't know if you could consider it Old Testament Judaism, because obviously there is no Old Testament Judaism. It's rabbinical Judaism, okay? Which because the temple no longer exists. As many say in the church, rightfully so, there is no priest, temple, or sacrifice. That ended with the destruction of the temple. So it's rabbinical Judaism. Now, am I saying that Ben Shapiro is a bad guy? No. But here's the thing. He is not invincibly ignorant. He knows who Jesus Christ claims to be, and he rejects Jesus Christ. Sorry, Ben. Sorry. Okay? You are not invincibly ignorant. Only God can plumb the depths of your heart. But when you stand before him, you're not going to say, I didn't know. You're not going to say, I didn't know, because you
well,
do know. You
because here's
reject.
the thing, and God, in his love for all people, and only those people know, and all of you who are listening to me, there are moments in life where God reveals truth to each soul, not in its entirety. Like, because like it's a walk. God, we don't all of a sudden like come to this, fullness of, to be honest with you, I mean, the fullness of salvation isn't revealed until Christ himself returns again. But what I am saying is there are moments in life where God reveals to you something. It's in your life, discerned within the day to day. Do you reject those moments or do you accept them? And that's where we will be held accountable. Like there are moments, what's the thing in the movies? The crossroads. When you come to the crossroad of a decision point, what do you choose? Oh,
Right.
well, it was inconvenient. I couldn't do that. Oh my gosh, I couldn't do that. Well, God could say, well, you can't come in. I don't know you.
His
I
house.
don't know you.
Joe, the fearful thing I would tell a lot of Catholics out there is like, yeah, we're talking from a Catholic point of view, okay? But I would say this is like, uh, I know I'm going to have a lot to answer for. That's why I stay close to confession because I do not forsake or despair
Listen,
of God's
that's a
mercy.
good Joe, that's a good practice. I just
Well, no,
went to
no,
confession. I mean, I'll be honest with
I
you.
went. I went today also. I mean, because here's the thing. But what I don't do is I don't reject the truth. Any faithful Catholic has to be able to say this. If you ask me if I'm perfect, if I told you yes, obviously that's a lie. Okay. Because none of us are perfect except our Blessed Mother and Jesus himself. Okay. Jesus first and then his Blessed Mother. If you ask me if I do everything right, of course not. And I would say that many Jews and many evangelical Protestants and many Muslims probably live outwardly a more moral life than I do. Okay. But that's a religion of works, not a religion of faith and works. Okay. You must accept Jesus and the redemptive act of his redemptive act on the cross. Okay. His salvific act on the cross in order to enter heaven, because that's such a gift that to reject it is a really grave sin. The church teaches that also. My point is that we're all going to stand before God. We're all going to be judged. But the one thing I don't want to be judged on is that I rejected the truth. I'm going to have to be judged on my sins, but I accept the truth of what the church teaches. Period. The end. And to say that to somebody else that that doesn't matter, just follow your conscience. Just to put a finer point on it, Joe, is just flat out wrong. And it's shepherds not acting as shepherds. Okay, it's teachers not acting as teachers, not just to Catholics, but to those outside the Catholic Church.
And also look at the saints. I always say follow the saints because they point to Christ. You could look at Philip Neri. He found trouble within the church. He's a saint. Philip Neri is a great saint, apostle of Rome. He was held back by the church. They penalized him. He accepted it. You see, that was Carapi's mistake. You could look at Padre Pio. He accepted it. He was in the right, but he accepted it because he recognized the authority of
Right.
Peter. You see, that is the thing, because God will defend you better than you can defend yourself. You see, this is something, that's why Christ did not open his mouth in front of, here I am, I have the power to take your life. You have no power against me. I lay down my life willingly.
Right.
You can't take my life. And God proved him right. You see, we want to justify ourselves in the here and now. If you are right, trust in this. God will defend you, and history will prove you right.
Well,
See,
Joe, even just on you're right in everything you said, but remember something also, just on a very practical level. If you get your throat cut in the arena, okay, by the powers that be, in the name of Jesus Christ, okay, you'll know immediately, okay, because you'll be in heaven. All right, that's the bottom. Whether history, and I agree with you. As an example to other people, look, who do we look to? Do we look to the Joe? Who are the most powerful people in human history? Roman emperors, okay, tyrants, English kings, okay, like Henry VIII, who persecuted the church, his witch daughter, who persecuted the church, okay, Elizabeth I, okay, communist dictators, fascist dictators, every one of them, okay. These are all the most powerful people. Do people actually look and say, I want to be like that person? But when they hear of stories of St. Francis of Assisi, okay, or 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 um or let's say, just take people or the early martyrs who are all saints, Saint Stephen, okay, Saint Stephen, who I consider, when I first was coming back to the church, when I read the story of Saint Stephen, Joe, I was blown away. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't read the stories. What did I know about Saint Stephen? We're blown away by these people for the reasons that you say, because they show a self-sacrificing impulse, love, compassion, the desire to do what Christ says. Okay, that's what moves people. All the powerful people in human history, Joe, we look at them kind of almost and laugh. Hitler blew his brains out in a bunker. All right. Stalin died on his deathbed with his fist like this. His daughter retells the story. Svetlana Stalin retells the story with his indignant fist raised up to God, and then he dropped dead and went straight to hell. Okay, nobody looks to these people as examples. Unfortunately, those who want power in the world, those who would manipulate truth and justice, okay, to try to sell their agenda, those people are the ones who look to the Neros and Caligulas and Stalins and Hitlers as kind of like, I want to be like those guys, or I want to have more power than them. The problem and why we're doing what we're doing, and those out there at the Crusade Channel and everywhere else, is we're trying to convince people, ordinary people out there, those are the ones you must fight against. Paul, Joe, I'm gonna hand it over to you for a final comment, because we're coming to an end. Paul made that point clear in Ephesians 6 when he said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We wrestle against powers and principalities and the spiritual darkness in high places. I think that sums it up. I think that sums it up perfectly. And unfortunately, some of that spiritual darkness right now exists in the hierarchy of the church. Joe, we have about a minute left. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, I just want to comment on something in in the chat room. Janet Frisco said, "True, but it's not easy." And Colin was reading my mind as I saw that. He said, "Janet, we have to stay the course, never give up." And here's the thing: it isn't easy. It's a struggle, but we don't rely on our strength. We rely on grace. You see, that's why you have to pray. That's why you have to live a sacramental life, go to confession regularly, receive the Eucharist in a state of grace, pray the rosary every day, sit in adoration. If you're struggling with something that is true, and that's real, that is as real as the day is long. And people struggle with all types of things. They struggle with chastity. They struggle with addictions. They struggle with all types of sins that they know to be wrong. God can give you grace, and that's real. You
Right.
see, that's the beauty. And then when you get that grace, you will have a tangible encounter with the Lord. You will see and feel and know in the depths of your being that God is real. You see, we have to ask and we have to seek it, as opposed to just saying, I can't do that. That's not realistic. Wrong.
Wrong.
And the saints show us that that is wrong because they did it, and they're no different than you and me.
Right. Joe, I would end our show tonight by just a quick comment on what you just said. I think it's important. A friend of mine, I told you, and I told the good people out there at the Crusade Channel a few weeks ago. He's coming back into the church. Came to mass with us. Went for a really couple of good confessions, adult confessions, praying. All right, and he asked me, and I think this speaks to what he said. He goes, "What kind of like what should I do now?" I said, I don't want to use his name. But I said, brother, I'm not God. I said, you're doing the right thing. You're going to mass, you're going to confession, you desire confession, and you're praying. God's going to do the rest. I was simply the vehicle by which you came back to church. All right. That's why I stepped in. And I think it's the same thing, Joe. I think a lot of people sometimes are fearful. Well, if I go into the church, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? What do I have to do? You always say, Joe, the basics, the ABCs, okay? Mass, penance, prayer. Let God do the rest. With an open heart, he's going to
And he
guide you.
will. And
He
he'll
will.
guide you to the fullness of truth.
Right.
That's what he does. You see, that's the grace that's given to you through those things, and that's
Right.
real.
Well, listen, if you want to talk about, Joe, we started this conversation talking about truth. Okay, this whole conversation is about truth, reality, what's real. When your mind corresponds to what's real is what's truth. What you just said, that's rock solid Catholic truth. I would say to anybody, final point, get back. If you're thinking about getting back into the church, get into the church. Don't worry about Joe and Joe. Don't worry about Mike Church. Don't worry about the rest of us. Pray, go to confession, go to mass. God will show you the way. Joe, we have to leave it there. We have to leave it there because we could talk about this for hours, okay? But I think it was a great conversation today at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Remember, all you good people out there, support Joe and I at the Frontline TV on YouTube. And if you want to kick in a few bucks, go to the frontlinetv.com, thefrontlinetv.com. You could drop in $5 each. Joe and I's goal is to get to 100,000 people on the frontlinetv.com at $5 each, and we'll change the world. That's all. All right, I'll make it very easy because then we can quit our jobs. In the meantime, we certainly just a particular note of gratitude to Mike Church, the King Dude, who's always been gracious to us, always welcoming to us, loves what we do, encourages us, tells us, fellas, you got to keep going, do what you do. So we just want to say thank you to him and the entire cast and crew down at the Crusade Channel. We want to thank you for listening to us on the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession from sunup to sundown. The Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing.